We have been debating for weeks now a needed solution to our economic recovery in the United States. We have seen some progress, but it is a long and difficult journey for American families. The depth of the crisis materialized in the last few years of the Bush administration, and it cannot be overcome in 18 months, although I believe we're headed in the right direction. But the legislation we're considering will help us in that journey to recovery. We have seen, in fact, over the last several months, an increase in private sector jobs. We didn't see that in the last several years of the Bush administration. When President Obama took office, we were losing 750,000 jobs a month, and we had 22 straight months of job losses. Now we've begun to turn that dynamic around, creating private sector jobs, but we have to do much, much more. And the great engine of private job creation is small business in America. And these provisions are aimed to aid small businesses throughout the country. Small business is an engine of growth. It's the place where people will, I think, find employment as we go forward. Our small business community has been hit very hard by the economic crisis, the financial crisis, the intertwined crisis, the credit bubble, the collapse of the credit bubble. They've lost more than 6 million jobs since December 2007, and we've got to start restoring those jobs. The legislation we're considering today, the Small Business Jobs Act, will provide $12 billion in fully paid for tax breaks for small businesses to bolster confidence in the economy by unlocking frozen credit markets, spurring job creation, and fostering our nation's recovery. And these tax incentives will allow small businesses to make investments that help with job growth, purchases, and expansion. I will emphasize once again, these are fully paid for because we have multiple challenges. I've served long enough to recall in 2000 when we were looking at strong employment growth, a federal budget surplus, and in 2009 when President Obama took office, we were looking at job collapse in many parts of the country and a huge deficit, which is still daunting. So we have to consider both as we move forward. The particulars of this legislation are, I think, important to note because they will contribute, I believe, very significantly and one would hope very quickly to increase job opportunities throughout the country. The legislation will incentivize investors by giving 100% exclusion from capital gains taxes on small business investments. It'll create a targeted $30 billion small business lending fund to provide small community banks with the capital to increase their ability to lend to small businesses. This is particularly notable, and I must commend Senator Landrieu and others, but particularly Senator Landrieu for her tenacious advocacy of this provision. Senator Merkley and others, and in fact, indeed, this is a bipartisan effort also. This proposal will put in the hands of small community banks who want to lend, who have clients, who do it the old-fashioned way. You know, they look at the books, they know the borrower, they have faith and confidence in that individual, and they're constrained now because they don't have sufficient capital to expand their lending. With this capital, they will be able to expand lending and go right out to the heart of small businesses throughout the country. And I know, just as in North Carolina, in Rhode Island, I have numerous businesses who would come in and say they're very successful, they want to expand, they can hire a few people, they just can't get the loan from the bank. This will help. Another provision reduces the tax burden for small businesses by allowing them to carry back general business tax credits to offset their tax burdens from the previous 5 years. Small businesses will also be able to count the general business credits against the alternate minimum tax. That'll free up capital for expansion and job growth. It also increases Section 179 expensing. It'll permit up to $500,000 in capital investments that business can expense, immediately get some tax credit for it. And it extends bonus depreciation, allowing taxpayers to immediately write off 50% of the cost of new equipment. And so what we hope that does is have the small businessman or woman buy a piece of equipment, which requires, we hope, a manufacturer someplace in the United States or an assembler someplace in the United States to call people back to work to meet this new demand. This is going to increase demands for goods and services, and that's one of the key deficiencies in this current economy. We've got a lot of money locked up. It's said, quite authoritatively, that there's about $2 trillion on the balance sheets of corporations throughout the United States, and they're not spending. We hope these incentives will produce increased demand, which will get them to start spending and provide the kind of private capital investment and momentum that will carry us forward. As I mentioned before, this Small Business Act has a $30 billion lending fund, and it's so critical. More than 10 community banks in Rhode Island, for example, will be eligible to receive these funds. I've spoken to many of the bank leaders. They're ready to lend right now. They have customers that they have great faith in, that they've got a good business plan, they're profitable. In fact, many times the business owners are willing to guarantee or to put up even a personal collateral to get the loan, and yet the bank says we can't do that because we've reached the limit based on our capital of what we can lend to small business. This will raise those limits. And it's absolutely necessary to do that. One other aspect, one important aspect, is that this legislation will raise the limits on loans that the Small Business Administration can make and guarantee. Again, another source of tremendous and important funding is being capped now because they can't make big enough loans. There's certain loan limitations. It's also going to eliminate the fees that borrowers pay to the SBA. So now you have businesses that may be ready to hire, but they just can't generate the cash to pay the fees. They'll be able to get the loan, hire the workers, and move forward. It also supports states because there are many state initiatives with a $1.5 billion grants to states that will help in their efforts. There are many states that have programs very much like our Small Business Administration at the federal level, innovative programs. They will be supported. This legislation has bipartisan support, and it's absolutely necessary. And again, I want to thank my colleagues, particularly my colleagues who were supportive of the cloture motion that has us now on a path to passage. I thank them very much for their efforts. They are making a decision that will benefit Americans across the country, small businesses in particular. We need to move forward. We need to get this legislation done, I hope, this week, as soon as we can. And then we have other legislation that we can and should consider. For example, we have a tax extenders bills that will hopefully provide R&D tax credits and other provisions that will help businesses, both large and small, but particularly small business. So, Madam President, I'm just urging all of my colleagues, now that we feel confident we have the votes, let's move to final passage. Let's give the American business, particularly small business, help they need to move the economy forward.